What if I told you that the relationship that you have with your son is slipping away and you don't even realize it? My name is Brian. The other guy is my son, Avery, and we help fathers rebuild the strained relationships that they have with their sons. It's only fitting that we share with you how our relationship went from fantastic to emotionally disconnected to broken. You see, in the span of 23 months, I lost my father, my only brother, and two of my grandparents. And as Avery would later say to me, I lost a big part of myself. You see, for the first time in my life, in my mid 40s, I was dealing with some mental health challenges. I was suffering from depression, anxiety. I was having panic attacks. And some nights I wasn't sleeping more than 2 or 3 hours. Not only did this almost cost me my life, but it also almost cost me my son. It's the reason that we do the work that we do because fathers need help connecting with their sons. Nobody got a manual on how to raise your kid. And we know the father-son relationship is not always easy.
Here's what I learned from the struggles that we went through. Having healthy, positive relationships in your life, that's a gift. You see, I was 11 and 12 years old when our family members passed, and the relationship with my dad began deteriorating from that point until I was 17 years old, when things got so bad that I had to sign a contract to remain in the home that I grew up in. So when I say having healthy, positive relationships in your life is a gift, I mean that from my heart. So we want to help you take your relationship with your son from strain to strong, and certainly in a shorter time frame than it took us. So by the end of this video, you'll know how to have meaningful conversations, how to incorporate self-awareness into your parenting, and how to resolve conflicts effectively. All right, so Pops, let's go ahead and dive into how fathers can begin to have more open conversations with their boys, because these are foundational to your relationships. See, my dad did a great job of teaching us how to engage in dialogue and to use critical thinking. And this was very useful as I got older and as our relationship began to suffer, because it helped me express myself. It helped me express what I needed or what I wasn't getting from my pops at the time. Here's the problem though. Open conversations can be extremely challenging. So I'm going to give you 3 skills that can help you have more open conversations with your son immediately. All right. Well, let me use my whiteboard here. The first of these skills that I'm going to talk about is listen. Listen. What do I mean by listening? Well, first off, it's important to note the difference between listening and hearing. And there is a major difference, because hearing is passive, right? Hearing is something that you just notice when you walk outside, birds chirping, cars driving by. Listening, it's active and it's much more intentional, right? It means being fully present, getting rid of the distractions that are perhaps right in front of you, turning the TV off, closing the laptop, putting the smartphone down, right? And focus on the conversation at hand. Listening isn't about having a perfect response. Listening is about understanding. Again, listening is not about having a perfect response. It's about understanding. Okay. So that brings me to the next skill that'll help you have more open conversations, and that's to learn. All right. When I say this, I mean ask open-ended questions that can give your son the space to express himself. the space to respond to a question with some critical thinking. Now, for me, this was a challenge because it takes me a long time to process things. And for my dad, well, he moves at rapid fire pace. And so it took him time to adjust to my communication style. But asking simple questions like, well, son, what's on your mind? Or how's school been going lately? These are the type of questions that'll open the door to more communication. And that's how we can learn. The last skill that I want to touch on is lead. Lead. What I mean by this is the goal of conversation isn't to prove that you, dad, are correct. No, the goal of conversation is connection, not correction. All right. Now, growing up, I had two examples. First example was my grandfather, who he led with patience, he led with presence, and he always knew how to create a safe space for me to come and talk to him about anything and everything. Now, my dad, on the other hand, well, he pushed harder at times. Sometimes I feel like he was a little more judgmental of the things that he was hearing, and it made me shut down. But over the years, I watched him grow and I watched him lead by example. All right. So these three skills that you see here on the screen, listen, learn, and lead, are three skills that'll help you have more open conversations with your son.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, he's absolutely right. Fathers do have to make the necessary adjustments. Let me share an adjustment that I made with you as my boys were getting a little bit older. I started to ask them, were they open to some feedback from me? It's a very, very simple thing that I did, but when they said they were, it was inviting me in to share what I wanted to share with them. If they said that they were not, well, I had to respect that too and just go ahead and move on because I wanted them to be open the next time that I asked them that question. You know, for fathers, listening has to become part of our program. Many fathers grew up in the era that I grew up in where it was better to be seen and not heard. Or if you were to ask the why behind a directive or an instruction that you were given, the response was simply because I said so. Fathers have to shift the conversation so it's a real dialogue, not a monologue from a father to their son. So the first step that we want you to take away from this video is to schedule one intentional conversation with your son this week, just one. And take those 3 L's that Avery just laid out with you into that conversation because they'll definitely be helpful.
Here's why open conversations are so important. First off, fathers are competing for their sons' attentions like never before. Social media, video games, peer influence, digital distractions, they're all stronger than ever. In fact, teens are spending up to 9 hours a day on screens, and that's outside of their schoolwork. Plus, the lack of interpersonal connection is leading to mental health struggles. However, boys who have open communication with their fathers are 2 times less likely to experience depression or anxiety than boys that don't. And teenage boys who feel like they can talk openly with their fathers are 80% less likely to engage in risky behaviors. If fathers don't learn how to intentionally connect and engage, they risk being drowned out by the noise of the world.
Next up, let's look at what it takes to become a self-aware father. Now, before we do, just know that in the comment section, we put an ebook that we wrote called Developing Self-Awareness. Make sure to download that after this video. So let's break this up into 3 parts: the why, the what, and the how. Starting with why self-awareness is so important. You are your son's first life coach. You're their first teacher. It's your job to model how to handle emotions, how you navigate challenges, and how to show up for the people that you love. Fathers will fail in their relationships with their sons if they fail to address the relationship that they have with themselves. And that begins with self-awareness. After my father and my brother passed away, I realized that I needed help navigating everything that was to come. I knew that I was doing damage to my marriage and my relationship with my son. I knew I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to, and I knew I wasn't showing up the way that I needed to. But I just was not self-aware enough to understand why I needed the help. Once I began to work on that why, I realized that self-awareness impacted every aspect of me being a father. For example, when it comes to generational cycles or generational curses, without self-awareness, you are doomed to repeat old patterns. With self-awareness, you can choose to pass on the legacy that you want to pass on. When I was in my early 30s, my father had a conversation with me where the first time he told me that he never liked his dad. He thought that he loved him. He wasn't quite sure, but he knew he did not like him. And the reason for that is because my grandfather was verbally and physically abusive to my father and his two younger siblings. I'm so grateful to my father that he took a stance and made the decision to not pass that behavior on to the next generation. Also, with self awareness, it helps you learn how to connect and not control. When you know your triggers and you understand your emotions a little bit better, it helps you to respond versus react. We all know the difference. When we react to something, something happens, we go right in. But when we respond, we'll pause. We'll think about the actions that we're going to take. And most of the time, those outcomes are much better. Plus, it's a wonderful way to begin to build trust with your son.
That was the why. This is the what self-awareness looks like in your fatherhood journey. First off, self-awareness is defined as the knowledge of your internal state. It's understanding your strengths as well as your weaknesses. But more than that, it's about understanding why you value the things that you value and why you believe the things that you believe. And developing your self awareness can help you uncover your purpose as a father. Now, there are three parts to our self awareness. Go ahead and talk about the first one, Pops.
Yeah, absolutely, son. So, the first part of our self awareness is something we call emotional self awareness. And that's just recognizing when you're angry, when you're stressed, when you're distracted, and then understanding how those things can affect your interactions. I want to illustrate this with a story. A few years ago, Avery called me to see if he could borrow my car. His was in the shop and he needed to run some errands. About 10 minutes after he left my home, he called and he let me know that he had had an accident. Well, immediately, my emotions took me to a place where I was angry and I was highly upset. I asked him what happened, and he told me that he hit a car in front of him and that car hit the car in front of it. Now, all of a sudden, I was just highly disappointed. And I asked him, did anyone get hurt? And he said no. Then my emotional roller coaster took me to feeling happy and a little bit joyful that nobody was hurt. I asked about the damage to the other cars, and he said the damage wasn't that bad. I was kind of relieved by that. But then I said, well, what about my car, son? What does it look like? And he texts me this picture. Y'all have to understand, I was only 2 car payments away from having this car paid off. Now that happiness and that joyfulness and that feeling of relief went right back to being angry and disappointed and upset. But then I caught myself because in listening to Avery's voice, I realized he didn't want to be making that phone call to me. The last thing in the world that any son wants to do is call his father and say, hey, I totaled your car. But that's why they call them accidents. And that's what I had to remind myself of in that moment. What was Avery feeling? I knew what I was feeling, but what was Avery feeling? And so I had to be mindful of that. That's just an example of how our emotional self-awareness can affect us on an hourly, a daily, a weekly basis. We just have to tune into those things when we're interacting with the people that we love.
Yeah, not my best moment. Let's go ahead and move on to the second part of our self-awareness, which is accurate self-assessment. Being honest with yourself is hard, but it's essential. And it means recognizing that as humans, we all have blind spots. Yes, all of us. And if you're the type of person that's watching this and thinking, yeah, I don't have any blind spots, well, guess what? That is your blind spot. Look, accurate self assessment helps fathers avoid operating on assumptions about themselves. For example, you might think your kids love or truly appreciate something that you're doing, but in reality, they might not. It ensures that your actions are matching your words so that what you say aligns with what you do. For instance, you might tell your kids, I'm very proud of you. But if your actions are rushed, distracted, absent, then they won't even feel it. Or you may be thinking that you're giving your son enough guidance in life, but he's actually craving more conversations and more attention from you. So being honest about what's really happening can open the door to real connection, which leads me to the third part, and that's personal power. As a father, your personal power isn't about being loud or flashy. It's a quiet confidence that lets you lead your family with purpose. It's not about always having the answers, but it is about showing up as your authentic self. And your kids will notice this, whether you realize it or not. By embodying this confidence, you are modeling the behavior for them. Now, personal power also builds resilience. And when your son sees you persevere through life's challenges and life's obstacles, you're showing him the coping skills that he'll need to face setbacks with strength and determination. Now, we want to share with you how you can begin to build your self awareness. And the first way is with an exercise called Who Are You? Now, this is an exercise that my dad and I have led thousands of fathers through over the years. And so, right now, we're going to demonstrate it for you. And then afterwards, we'll share with you how you can incorporate it in your household. All right, Pops, you ready
Yep,
to get this going?
I am. I am.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's go ahead and do this activity for 45 seconds.
Got it on the clock. Let's go.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you the question and you'll
Okay.
respond.
Very
Let's do
good.
it. Three, two, one. So, Pops, who are you?
I am a husband of 35 years.
Nice. Who are you?
I am a basketball coach.
Cool. Who are you?
I am an author.
There you go. But who are you?
I am a dog lover.
Same. Who are you?
I am someone working on becoming a better listener.
That's good. Who are you?
I'm a work in progress.
Nice. Who are you?
I'm someone who likes to travel.
There you go. Who are you?
I am out of time.
Very cool. Good for you. This is an excellent tool to get to know yourself better and to get to know someone else better too. So, dads, use this tool with your sons or with your spouses. Set a timer for 1 minute and let the other person ask, Who are you? Once you respond, they will ask you again, Who are you? Until the time ends. After that minute is finished, then it's your turn to ask them the question. This could be your go-to exercise with your son that allows you to grow together for years to come. The second way that we can begin to build our self-awareness is through journaling. Journaling. Simply at the end of the day, take 5 minutes and ask yourself, how did I show up today as a father? What went well? What could I have done better? These simple questions can lead to a lot of growth as a father.
Yeah, let me share one last way that we could build our self-awareness. And that's therapy. Right after the loss of my father, I went to a couple of different therapists, and neither one of them were good fits for me. And so I did what guys tend to do is tell myself I'll figure this out on my own. That didn't work out either. I finally ended up finding a therapist that was a good fit, and it did help. And since that time, I've gone back to therapy several times through the years. The reason for that is because moving forward was the only way that I could go. Standing pat or moving backwards was not an option. Therapy just helped me get to the other side. And sometimes for us fathers, that's hard to acknowledge. So let's move on to the last thing that we want to touch on in this video, and that's conflict resolution. Now, conflict is inevitable. We don't all think the same. We don't all have the same preferences or the same perspectives. Now, the reason that we discuss open conversations and self-awareness first is because they're the foundational pillars that help us navigate conflict. Near the start of this video, Avery talked about the fact that he had to sign a contract when he was 17 years old to stay in our home. Let me give you the backstory. In spite of getting accepted to many colleges, my wife and I decided that he would go to the university in our hometown for his freshman year. He could work, save his money, and then after his freshman year, he could transfer to any school that he wanted to. So in the summer leading to his freshman year in college, he was testing boundaries when it came to the rules of our home. He was displaying a little bit of attitude, staying out extra late, not even giving us the courtesy of a text message. He was just pushing the envelope. And then one morning in our kitchen, we had an argument that became very, very heated. And Avery just yelled out, "Man, I'm ready to go. I'm out of here." And I looked at him and I told him I was ready for him to go myself. Avery, going to pick up the story.
Well, a few hours later, he presented me two contracts. One, if I wanted to stay in the home, and the other, if I wanted to move out. And then he said, I only had 24 hours to make my decision. Internally, I was thinking, this is crazy. But in reality, our relationship was headed that way for a long time. We were so angry and so disconnected at that point in our lives. And again, I was 17 years old. So I felt like my choices were limited. And I ended up signing the contract to stay at home. But what turned out to be the low point of our relationship was simultaneously the turning point of our relationship. And really, that's because of the actions that my father took after I signed the contract.
Yeah, in those 24 hours, the realization came over me that I was very close to losing my son. This was the biggest argument that we had ever had, and it was really the tipping point in our lives. So I began to think about how I could reconcile the mess that we found ourselves in. And while there are many ways to solve conflict, here are 5 steps that I use and 5 steps that you can use to resolve conflict with your son. Step number 1, extend an invitation. That was my first step to humility. I invited him out for dinner so we could talk. I didn't try to force him to go. I simply invited him. I asked him to join me, and fortunately for me, he did. Step number 2, drop the ego. I apologize for my part in our relationship taking the downturn that it had. I told him I was trying to work on myself. I asked him to be patient with me. The thing about apologies, it's one of the most vulnerable acts that you can ever do. You're actually surrendering to someone. And sometimes as dads, we let pride get in the way. So we have to drop our ego. Step number 3, create a safe environment. I wanted to create a safe space for us to be able to have the conversation. That's why I invited him out to the restaurant. I did not want to remain in our home because our home was the place that most of our arguments and disagreements over the years had taken place. So I was looking to give him some psychological safety so he could relax a little bit, let his guard down. And fortunately for me, it gave me psychological safety to do the same. Step number 4, reignite the connection. And when we went out to dinner, we noticed there was a basketball game on television, and that is something that we always connected with, sports. We had the opportunity to revisit some good memories as we sat there and watched the game. We ended up talking about some vacations that our family had taken through the years and even shared some funny family stories. And it reminded us of all of the good times that we had in spite of the bad times that we were going through. Step number 5, commit to being better. That night when we got home from the restaurant, I wrote Avery a letter and I left it on his dresser for him to read the next morning. Essentially, I wrote a love letter to my son. I let him know in this letter how proud I was of the young man that he had become. I thanked him for supporting me through all the difficulty that I had been going through in the previous years. And I shared with him that I felt that the moments that we were in were just a snapshot in time, and this too shall pass. The reason that I am sharing this with you is because I want every father and son to experience what we experience right now. For the last 7 years, we have been business partners and the best of friends. But for a long time, we were living in hell. And right now, I can truly say that our relationship is pretty heavenly. So the next time that you get into conflict with your son, and conflict is going to come about, use these 5 steps to help you resolve it so your relationship can be the relationship that the two of us share right now.
To recap, we talked about 3 keys that can help your strained relationship with your son go to a strong relationship: open conversations, self-awareness, conflict resolution. Dads, your son doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be receptive. What may feel small to you may feel really big to your son.
If you found this video to be helpful, make sure that you hit that like and the subscribe button. And remember to download your ebook on developing self-awareness. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you're willing to put in the work, things can always get better. We'll see you next time.